Is India's global stature rising? If you go by world headlines and the diplomatic buzz, the answer seems to be a resounding yes. New Delhi's firm stance against Donald Trump's tariff offensive has turned into a defining geopolitical moment. The standoff with Trump has come at a cost: punitive tariffs of 50%, a bruising trade battle. But the long-term gains are larger. If this was a test to determine whether India would claim its independent place in the world or settle as a vassal, then standing its ground wasn't even a choice. It was a necessity. So what is happening? This is Shubhangi Sharma and you're watching Fine Point. Let's dive in. Trump is known for playing the madman game, shocking his opponents with hyperboles and threats and forcing them to fold. Except he's been using this tactic not with adversaries, but with friends and allies. This madness hopped from country to country, humiliating nations and putting them in a spot. But this time, he ran into a wall called India. While most countries caved under pressure, India has stood firm, calm and composed. It all boils down to a simple principle, really. India's sovereignty is non-negotiable, and no amount of pain inflicted by the US or anyone else can change that. And that message is resonating globally. The world now sees India as a country that doesn't blink, even when Washington tries to strong-arm it. Prime Minister Modi captured the mood perfectly in Japan. The world isn't just watching India, it is counting on India.
The world is not just watching India. It is counting on India.
And India is proving why. This fiscal's first quarter GDP growth came in at 7.8%, higher than the expected 6.5%, even amid global uncertainty and Trump's tariff tantrums. That's resilience on display. Washington is buzzing with alarm and criticism about Trump's India policy. Some even call it his biggest mistake yet, with geopolitical consequences beyond just trade. There's a striking chorus pushing back against Trump. Jeffrey Sachs called the move stupid and that serves no purpose, while Nikki Haley warned of a troubling inflection point and urged treating India as a prized democratic partner central to balancing China. John Kerry criticized an ultimatum style, too much ordering and pressuring, not enough genuine diplomacy, arguing that great nations don't lead by coercion alone. The Economist, meanwhile, labeled the tariff push a giant own goal, noting the inconsistency of penalizing India while sparing larger purchasers of Russian energy. The Wall Street Journal urged Trump to note the complexity of India's political economy. No Indian leader will commit political suicide by crossing the red line on agriculture and dairy. Even pro-Trump voices like Sagar and Jetty called the tariffs pointless, criticizing Trump for tariffing India to purportedly bring peace in Ukraine, a strategy that does not even work. Meanwhile, former US officials sounded alarms at various levels. These are just some examples out of hundreds of global headlines. If tariffs were bad, Trump's advisors made things worse. Peter Navarro's bizarre outburst about Brahmins profiteering wasn't just factually wrong, it was racially charged, a political matchstick in India's caste-sensitive landscape. The backlash was so fierce that the US Embassy in Delhi scrambled for damage control, tweeting photos of Marco Rubio in a desperate "We still like India" charm offensive. This almost made it seem like the true message was that Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State and perhaps the only diplomat left in the White House, was the voice to be taken seriously, not Navarro. But Rubio's job has already been made nearly impossible by the non-diplomats, Trump's wolf warrior tariff czars, who have no regard for diplomacy. They have rambled on for too long, often following the president's lead and sometimes going even further, as seen in Navarro's inflammatory remarks, like calling the Ukraine war Modi's war and the absurd remark that Brahmins are profiteering from Russian oil. Around the same time as Navarro's remark, visuals emerged of Prime Minister Modi at the SCO summit in China in animated conversation with Putin and Xi, images which were splashed across global media as a symbol of a shifting world order. Those optics sent a chill through Washington. And that's when Trump's tone seems to have changed a bit. Despite some rumored health setbacks, the president did react. But the message seemed aimed more at his domestic audience than at New Delhi. The tone was surprisingly subdued compared to his usual style. Gone were the all-caps rants and dramatic threats. But in typical Trump fashion, it still carried hyperbolic claims about trade. His first claim: India sells massive amounts, but the US sells India very little. The relationship is totally one-sided, a one-sided disaster. But fact check this. That's simply not true. The trade relationship is far more balanced than Trump suggests, arguably even tilted in favor of the United States if you consider services, education, tourism, and investments. Trump fixates on goods, but the real story is in the broader economic engagement. According to the Global Trade Research Initiative, the US enjoys surplus earnings of $35 to $40 billion from India. Indian students alone contribute $25 billion annually to the US economy. That's entirely one-sided. Add to that the billions American tech giants Amazon, Google, IBM, Dell generate through their operations in India. Hollywood dominates the entertainment market, and consumer brands like McDonald's and Coca-Cola earn huge revenues here. As for Trump's obsession with trade deficits, America's goods trade deficit with India, which is about $46 billion, isn't even in the top 5. It's at number 10. China tops the list here at $296 billion, followed by Mexico, which is at $176 billion, and Vietnam, $123 billion. India doesn't even come close. So what is this disaster that Trump is talking about? Now his second claim. The United States sells very little to India, he says. Again, this is misleading. In 2024, US exports to India were at $41.75 billion, nearly on par with what it exports to France, which is at $44.39 billion. Now that's hardly very little. And if American businesses can't sell into India, then what explains the dominance of US brands from Amazon to Nike across the Indian market? Finally, Trump argues that India buys most of its oil and military equipment from Russia and very little from the US. Well, the truth is, India's oil imports from the US actually grew during Trump's first term, and India was open to buying more to reduce the trade gap. On defense, the story is similar. While Russia remains a legacy supplier, its footprint has narrowed, and US defense exports to India have surged in the last decade. India has purchased billions worth of American hardware. So again, what is Trump talking about? America isn't being robbed blind. The one-sided narrative simply does not hold. And then came the kicker from Trump. He says that India has now offered to cut their tariffs to nothing, but it's getting late. Now, is this an off-ramp he's sketching for himself? A face-saving way to walk back on the tariffs? Because India's offer has been clear for a while. Significant tariff reductions on a wide range of items with firm red lines on agriculture, dairy, and politically sensitive sectors. And that hasn't changed. So will he take the deal? Trump's crusade was supposedly about Russian oil. Trump's hypocrisy is glaring though. He hit India with punitive tariffs, but spared China, the biggest supplier of Russian crude. This has left China and Russia even more confident. They have now sealed a deal for a mega gas pipeline called the Power of Siberia 2. Now, Russia will be selling even more energy to China. Trump had expressed his wish to pull Russia away from China, but his policy has brought them even closer. Now that this policy of isolating India has not worked when it comes to peace in Ukraine, Trump is pushing the Europeans to come up with a holistic sanctions package against Russia. But will that ever come to life? With India, he seems to have sobered down, lowering the attacks and falling back on his old grouse, trade, while dialing down mentions of Russian oil. So this will make you wonder, what was this fallout with India really about? Doesn't seem to be Russian oil. The media has already outed Trump. On the June phone call with Modi, the New York Times reported that Trump tried to get Modi to nominate him for the Nobel Prize alongside the Pakistanis, even though Trump had no substantive role in the ceasefire between India and Pakistan, and Indian foreign policy simply does not allow mediation on Kashmir. Trump echoed Pakistani talking points, and Modi rejected them point by point. But Trump went on like a broken record even after this call, claiming he stopped the war, perhaps hoping that India would eventually come around. So did this ultimately hurt Trump's feelings, that Modi urged him to face the nuances of a decades-long conflict instead of inserting himself as the self-obsessed central figure? Did Trump launch the India is funding Russia's war machine narrative to discredit India's geopolitical position because he felt challenged? Look, Trump's message about avoiding wars is great. Every US president should be applauded for being anti-interventionist. But the truth is, Trump did bomb Iran and carried out several strikes in the Middle East, and his claim about ending 7 wars is weak. Some had already ended, and some had never even began. Still, his Nobel bid would not have faced any opposition from India. But the problem is that he tried to win this Nobel at the expense of India, at the expense of its decades-long foreign policy and its hard-won positions in a bitter conflict with Pakistan, which continues to sponsor terrorism against India, by the way. If Trump truly were a man of peace, he would have acted against Pakistani terror groups targeting India. Instead, he's doing the opposite, embracing Pakistan's military dictator. And it gets worse when you see why. Because Trump knows all about Pakistan-sponsored terrorism. It hasn't just killed Indians, it has killed Americans too. But Trump has sold India out for crypto money. And I'm not the only one saying this. America's own former NSA Jake Sullivan said, and I quote, "Because of Pakistan's willingness to do business deals with the Trump family, Trump has thrown the India relationship over the side." Does Trump even realize the minefield he has walked into? Now there are reports that Prime Minister Modi has ignored 4 calls from Trump since then. The message from Modi is consistent and clear. Trump needs to sober up, face reality, and negotiate in good faith, not the bad faith antics we've seen so far. This moment has clearly elevated India's stature in the eyes of the world, friends and foes alike. Instead of being spooked by the 50% tariff, Prime Minister Modi stood firm and resilient. He has leveraged the strength of the Indian economy and sharpened his call for manufacturing in India. India is also practicing its strategic autonomy in ways Washington has yet to fully grasp. The US underestimated India's ability to reset ties with China, maintain its partnership with Russia, play the balancing game with Japan and France, and most importantly, stand its ground against America's illogical demands with facts. The madman strategy simply does not work on self-assured civilization states like India. The assumption that India had no cards to play, therefore, was highly and grossly miscalculated.